So let's talk a little bit about an issue that the progressive community is admittedly split on. It's the issue of genetically modified foods. So are they safe? Are they not safe? Why? Why not? We're going to dive into all that. But first, let's ask Neil deGrasse Tyson what he thinks.
I'm amazed how much objection genetically modified foods are receiving from the public. It smacks of the fear factor that exists at every new emergent science where people don't fully understand it or don't fully know or embrace its consequences and so therefore reject it. What most people don't know, but they should, is that practically every food you buy in a store for consumption by humans is genetically modified food. There are no wild, seedless watermelons. There's no wild cows. You list all the fruit and all the vegetables and ask yourself, is there a wild counterpart to this? If there is, it's not as large, it's not as sweet, it's not as juicy, and it has way more seeds in it. We have systematically, genetically modified all the foods, the vegetables and animals that we have eaten ever since we cultivated them. It's called artificial selection. That's how we genetically modified them. So now we can do it in a lab, all of a sudden you're going to complain? If you're the complainer type, go back and eat the apples that grow wild. You know something? They're this big and they're tart. They're not sweet like red delicious apples. We manufactured those.
So he's coming out swinging in favor of GMOs, and he's saying, look, virtually nothing we eat is natural. That's one of the most misused terms and words out there, this idea that anything that's natural is good for you and anything that's unnatural is bad for you. I mean, there's so many things that are natural that are horrible for you, and so many things that are unnatural that are fantastic for you, like vaccines, for example. Right? And like virtually all of modern medicine. So that's something that's very misused and abused. And he's saying all the food we eat is modified in one way or another. So how do we know? Let's take a step back. How do we know for sure that that's true? Well, let's do what all good liberals do on the issue of climate change, right? And what do we say? Well, where's the scientific consensus? So let's look for the scientific consensus on the issue of GMOs. A report issued by the International Council for Science, or the ICSU, which is an organization consisting of 111 national academies of science and 29 scientific unions, looked at 50 scientific reviews of genetically modified crops and concluded, quote, currently available genetically modified foods are safe to eat. And they also said, quote, there is no evidence of any deleterious environmental effects having occurred from the trait-species combinations currently available. All right, but you might say, well, that's, just the International Council for Science. Do you have any more? Let's see. The World Health Organization says, quote, current varieties of GM foods are not likely to present risks for human health. In addition, no effects on human health have been shown as a result of the consumption of such foods by the general population in the countries where they have been approved. We also have the Society of Toxicology. They found, quote, the level of safety of current biotechnology-derived foods to consumers appears to be equivalent to that of traditional foods. The Government Accountability Office also reviewed the scientific literature and concluded, quote, biotechnology experts believe that the current regimen of tests has been adequate for ensuring that genetically modified foods marketed to consumers are as safe as conventional foods. Okay, this is appearing to get overwhelming. So the experts with whom the Government Accountability Office consulted also pointed out, quote, there is no scientific evidence that GM foods cause long-term harm such as increased cancer rates, and, quote, there is no plausible hypothesis of harm. So they're saying not even is there no harm empirically, there's not even a possible hypothesis to say that these things can give you harm. Okay, in 2000, the report Transgenic Plants and World Agriculture, issued by 7 national academies of sciences, included including the U.S. National Academy of Sciences and the British Royal Academy, found that, quote, no human health problems associated specifically with the ingestion of transgenic crops or their products have been identified. One more. Also in 2000, the American Medical Association report noted, quote, worldwide, many people are eating GM foods with no overt adverse effects on human health reported in the peer-reviewed scientific literature and according to regulatory agencies. So, are GM foods safe? Yes, yes they are. 2, don't buy into the junk science that tries to mask itself as if it's real science. Now, let me go a little deeper here. Does that mean that genetically modified foods shouldn't be labeled? No, of course not. Look, I see no problem with labeling them. Of course, I'm always in favor of more information. Now, that might lead to some people who don't know any better saying, well, I'm going to avoid all genetically modified foods, and then, they end up inconveniencing themselves. But whatever, it happens. There are going to be some people who don't know the reality, and they'll say, I'm just going to avoid it, and they don't know it's actually not going to harm their health in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, fine. Label them all. I've got no problem with that whatsoever. And the final points to make about this. There was one study that found that mice get tumors when they eat a certain kind of GMO. That study has been thoroughly discredited and debunked upon peer review. They found multiple flaws in how it was done. The rats that they used were predisposed to having incredibly high rates of cancer anyway. So that one study is something that a lot of people have latched onto and said, oh my God, look at this. Either GMOs are all bad or we need more study, when the reality is, like I just went through, we actually have a scientific consensus. And think about it like this, man. This issue is very similar to the vaccine issue. How vaccines are totally safe and you should totally use them, and they're totally, scientific and correct, and we should do more vaccines and create more. But there's people have latched on to this discredited bogus study, and there's a strong community of anti-vaxxers that think they're smarter than the majority of scientists. They're not. By the same token, it's the same thing on the issue of genetically modified foods. What people don't get, man, is we need genetically modified foods. Do you not understand that if we didn't have genetically modified foods, we wouldn't be able to feed 7 billion people? Not only that, but with climate change getting worse and worse, we need to tweak the genes in order to do drought-resistant crops. It's an absolute necessity at this point. And like he was saying, look, the bananas you eat, the apples you eat, those are all genetically modified. Do you have any idea what a wild banana looks like? It's gross. It doesn't look perfect like the ones you get in the store. Those are totally genetically modified. I bet you didn't know that the bananas that you know and love and I know and love, those are all genetically modified. So, in conclusion, look, man, I get it. Does this issue mean that, well, that means Monsanto is good? They're a good company. No. Monsanto is evil, and they do genetically modified food, so genetically modified foods are evil too. And that's a logical thing to think about, because there's so much evidence that I've seen the documentaries. I've read what they'll do is they'll plant their genetically modified seeds in one field, and then the seeds will blow over to the neighboring small farm, and it'll grow on his farm naturally. And then they go to the guy and say, you owe us hundreds of thousands of dollars because you're using our crop and you didn't pay for it. They've destroyed small farmers, and Monsanto is they care about is their profit margin. But specifically on the issue of GMOs, GMOs are safe. Monsanto is still a sucky company, and we need more regulation against them, and we need to make sure they don't continue to do this profit run-amok model, okay? That's true, but it's also true that GMOs are safe. And if you don't take my word for it, take all the different scientific academies I just gave you, take their word for it, or take Neil deGrasse Tyson's word for it.